Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is chapter 3 of Mornstar, the Maiden Voyage. Please don't re-upload my stuff, and, as always, enjoy! Chapter 3. There were many other towns like that one, each with a similar story of disaster and ruin. As they were walking a few yards outside the town, they came to a giant hole in the ground that seemed to open into another world altogether. That was the oil mine. Some people used to say that there were beasts unlike any others down there. Even with the lamp lit, there was no piercing through the dark haze. Just the thought of falling down there made Dawn shudder. There was a windmill and a few power poles that were long forgotten. The sky was a light gray color, and the clouds were thin and wispy. On and on they walked until it seemed they would never get farther. Across the endless empty fields there was nothing. No sound, no life, but when one sound came, it was heard loud and clear. It's a car. Why would a car be all the way out here? Dylan, hide. We don't know who's in that thing or what they want. Dawn had the right idea, because the people who got out of the car were more men in black. With them was a small, round man in green. At a distance it was hard to see, but he had a light gray mustache and a green hat to match his outfit. It was lucky the grass was so tall, but they had to be careful not to make any sound. It was actually more difficult than you would think, because they were constantly on the verge of laughter. Ugh, this road is so muddy. My boots are filthy. You say that, but driving in this slop was much more difficult. Now, boss, why do we have to come down here again? You said there was an energy signature like the one we've been chasing. It must be here somewhere. So we have to search all this damp, muddy ground for a rock? Perhaps. Perhaps not. But if you see anyone, apprehend them. Dawn and Dylan were very careful to make no sound as they sneaked across the squelchy ground. It seemed like they were getting nowhere, and the men were getting ever closer. Dylan looked at Dawn, whom he was following, then chanced a glance at the men behind him. He whispered, I can distract him. If I run, then they'll chase me and you can get to safety. No, you can't do that. It would take much too long for me to get to safety, and you would be captured. Still, we need time. If I do it, then they might just leave and you would be safe. What if they don't leave? Dylan! Dylan stood up and began to run past many men back the way they had come. Hey, there he is! Get him! The men took off running after him, and Dawn went running after them too when she saw what they were doing. The men were giving hand signals and cornering Dylan so that he had nowhere to run except into the oil mine. Her feet were flying, and she held her crystal close in her right hand. Her hair was streaming backward, and her eyes were glittering with tears as the bitter wind crashed into her face. The men were about to capture Dylan, and their boss was there too. He asked a simple question. Where is the meteor? Like I'd ever tell you. The man swiped his hand to one side, and the men closed in with the intention to knock him off the cliff to a certain death. Before they were able to do so, Dawn came crashing into him instead. They fell, but Dawn still held her crystal. Dylan was watching her as they continued to fall, and suddenly she began to glow. Her face shimmered in the crystal's light, and her eyes fixed downward. White, feathered wings exploded from her back, and she flew. Down, down, down. The oil mine was dark and grim. The light from Dawn's transformation laced the surface of an oil lake. They landed lightly on the ground, and the light started to diminish. Dylan took out the lantern, lit it, and held it out in front of him. Maybe we can go farther underground. He looked at Dawn. The men won't be able to catch us down here. They walked along the gritty cavern floor. The light from the surface could be seen, but it did not reach them. Dawn looked around, and a dark feeling stirred inside her. I don't like it here. They neared the oil lake. It was too wide to find foothold around it. Dawn, can you fly us across, do you think? She nodded, but her mouth was tight. She put her arms around him and looked toward the ceiling. Her powerful wings let her soar with ease, and soon they were flying lowly over the lake. The light from the lantern lit all around it in a small radius, but as they kept on, they noticed it was not the only light. What is it? Dylan squinted at the pair of yellow lights ahead. Dawn chanced to glance down and suddenly wished she didn't. The oil lake, which was pitch black before, now looked to her like thick, red blood. A sinking feeling took hold of her, one that she could not shake. Dylan held out the lantern further, trying to see what the lights could be, when one pair moved up higher than the rest. Why, I think it's alive. It stood there, barring their way, though they still could not see what it was. This is when Dawn's terror got the better of her, and she suddenly exploded with white light. All was clear. Right before them stood a giant, dripping pile of oil with big yellow eyes. It had protrusions coming from its head, which were also covered in oil. It came closer, and more of them appeared behind it. They made no sound, but at the sight of them, Dawn screamed. She turned to fly away, and her light dimmed. She was utterly terrified and longed for the bright sunlit surface. However, Dylan was looking back at the creatures. When Dawn's light went out, the yellow eyes sunk into the oil lake, and nothing was there anymore. They were flying in darkness as the lamp had gone out with the wind. It seemed a miracle when Dawn found the whole entrance. She tore upwards like a shooting star and didn't stop until they were safe and high. The giant hole of the oil mine was just a speck from up here. The houses in the nearby town, which in reality was not so nearby, were much smaller. Each blade of grass stained the earth green. Each flower was so small that it seemed not to exist at all. Dylan's mouth was open in awe as they glided amongst the clouds. The hills were small mounds. The trees were small plants. The world was so far and small, so different, and it was beautiful. With every beat of her wings, Dawn seemed more like an angel to him. The sky was her home. This was her domain. She smiled as the sunlight caught her silvery hair. The sky is my ocean. The earth is the bottom of the sea, she sang happily. Suddenly, Dylan's eyes were opened wide. He saw the world as she had her entire life, so small and far away, a different world altogether. Her white hair glittered unnaturally in the brightness, almost too much to take in. Her crystal pendant flashed as the wind whipped it against her chest. The sun was staining the clouds a light yellow. They flew straight into its light, higher and higher, until even the clouds were far below them. Dylan's eyes seemed to widen, and one might say his eyes were brighter because of it. So bright was this place, so high that even the stars could be seen. They flashed bigger and smaller. Inside he knew they were speaking, that they were calling to him. "What are they saying?" he called to Dawn. "They are welcoming you to the great above." He smiled once more and was bright inside. Dawn had set her course to a mountain peak far below them. She started to glide downward, and their time in another world was over. Dylan wished that it would never end. The sun was setting, and the night was closing over them. Suddenly, the silence all around them became clear and compressing. The only sound was a bird far away. There was a sense of trouble in the air. Dylan could not put his finger on the cause, but it came soon enough. He looked up at Dawn and saw her eyes. They were unblinking and looked as if they were not in the present moment. Then he noticed her wings. They were flapping slower and slower, and they were falling further and further down. She was asleep. "Dawn, wake up! We're falling!" Dawn's eyes gently closed and her wings tucked. Now they were really falling. The mountain was just below them, but even a landing from this height would severely injure them. There was nothing he could do. He thought quickly. How do you land safely? He recalled a kite that his father had brought him. He remembered how it had to lean to turn. Could he do this? Was it just the same? Dylan pulled himself forward in her grasp, then leaned backward. As he did so, the weight of them shifted, and they began to glide straight again. Dawn's wings opened, and they swooped into a glade near the top of the mountain. Her arms failed, and Dylan went tumbling across the grass, while she glid right into a pool within the glade. Dawn! Dylan went scrambling to the pool, tearing off his shoes and socks to go in after her. She emerged with her eyes closed and her mouth open, but her wings were gone. He dragged her to the edge of the pool and shook her. Dawn! Dawn, wake up! She spat water and coughed. Her eyes opened slightly and she smiled weakly. I'm sorry. Are you okay? He sighed in relief. Yes. And you? She looked past him to the open sky. Yes. Just tired. The moon shone gently upon them. In its soothing light, her eyes closed and she fell asleep. Dylan had her still in his arms. He sighed, then smiled.